move on. That'd be great. I've got good advice here with the young girls. Hello, Twirler.
Hello, Brettles. Very
Well,
good. Yeah, tip top.
Chapman.
Hello, mate.
Hey, Chris.
Hello, Brett. How are you?
Good, thank you. And you?
Yeah.
Dan?
Hey mate, how you doing?
Well, cold old Hobart.
Oh wow,
We've got the fire on.
oh beautiful.
Well, let's talk about some tactics.
Okay, all right. So look, welcome everyone to our fourth SB20 in Conversation series. This is tonight's focus is tactics and teamwork. And we're lucky enough to have on board tonight people from all over Australia and with experience sailing across the world. David Chapman, who's in Sydney tonight. Welcome, David. And Chris Dare, who's moving between Victoria and New South Wales at the moment. But welcome, Chris. Good to see you. Darren Jones, or affectionately known as Twirler, who's in Adelaide, joining us tonight. Ben Lamb in, must admit, one of my favourite places, Byron Bay, and with his buddy River, they're sitting there behind him, his roommate, and, who has 4 legs and is a little hairy, so that's the face you're seeing.
Just like his dad.
No comment there. And Brett Cooper, who's in Hobart. Welcome everyone, and before we start, I'd just like to let you know we're recording tonight. If you're happy with that, stay on the line. If you're not, perhaps step out. But also I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we all meet tonight, and for Tasmania or in Hobart, the Muanina people, and acknowledge their traditional owners and elders past, present and emerging. So there's a few things to get through tonight. Don't forget that if you've got questions to send to our panel, pop those onto the Zoom chat. Some people sometimes send them to me via my mobile, that's okay. But you can pop them in the chat and everyone will see them. So I'm going to actually ask each of the panel members for 30 seconds just to introduce themselves and tell us where they are with their sailing at the moment. Obviously it's the COVID world, but just to let them tell you about themselves. I might start with you, Twirler.
Yeah, hi. Well, definitely the last 3 months or so has been basically nil sailing. We started off with the first regatta back, probably in the country, last week in New South Wales with the MC38 regatta up in Sydney. I mean, for me, with our borders being shut, I've had to come back and isolate for 2 weeks because of it. But it looks like the ball's slowly going to start rolling shortly. Obviously a little hiccup down in Victoria, and it looks like potentially our borders are going to be shut again to Victorians and potentially New South Wales. So it's going to make my trip from Sydney and back a little bit hectic, and hopefully there's not less than 2 weeks between an event. But I think sailing in the world has started to come back good again in the last month or so. I know in Newport, Rhode Island, where I normally base out of for the Northern Hemisphere summer, it's all sort of started to kick off. But you know, as you all will know, there's no travelling to the United States, there's no travelling to Europe, and definitely for Australians, I don't think that we're going to be travelling to the Northern Hemisphere. And I don't know, I'm hanging on probably 12 months, I reckon.
Thanks, Twirler. And just for those listening, you've got a few World Championships under your belt. Just give me a quick a grab bag of what medals are hanging behind the door.
Yeah. Well, over the years, I've been lucky enough to win 9 world titles. The same for Australian Championships in all sorts of classes. Edgel 22s, Mildred 32s, Far 30s, Far 40s, just all the one design keel boats that we all sail in around the place. So yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be with some good teams that have dragged me across the line over the years, and hopefully one day we'll be able to do it with Mr. Cooper down there in the SB20.
I assume you're speaking about Brett. So Brett, I'll kick to you there. Tell us where you're at with sailing at the moment and your journey so far.
Well, it's obviously very cold down here in Hobart in the middle of winter, and there's not a lot of sailing going on. The kids have been doing a lot of sailing at the local yacht club, and Sandy Bay Sailing Club, so they've been enjoying that post-COVID. It's been a bit disappointing for us, for Twirler and I and the team of Nick Corkle. You know, we planned to go out and do the Melgers Worlds in the 24, sorry, over in, where was that, Twirler?
Charleston.
Yeah, so that's a bit disappointing, and we've got a set of sails sitting over there ready to go, and the crew all ready to go, but unfortunately that wasn't to be the case. So, yeah, we set our sights on perhaps, we're hoping that we might be able to go to Portugal now. That's been pushed back a year, but again, that's the guides, and who knows where that will end up. Locally, yes, sailing will start to commence mid-winter. So hopefully we'll get on the water and maybe take out the new Melgers 32 that we've just recently acquired. But saying that, it'd be nice to get up to Queensland and maybe have a go at Early Beach Race Week and have a bit of a spell, and who knows, Twirler might come down. We might get into a bit of pre-summer training as well.
Yeah, sounds good. Chappo, how are things for you in Sydney?
Yeah, not too bad. I've been working on my golf swing, which is coming along quite slowly. But we've just started the winter series down here, and we're averaging about 150 boats on the water every Sunday. And a couple of times I've been fortunate enough to helm Chris Way's Easy Tiger up at Pittwater. So it slowly seems to be happening, and it's been no spinnakers to start with, and now spinnakers have been introduced. So it's all starting to happen.
Sounds good. And some of your yachting achievements. So time to blow your own trumpet here tonight.
I've been fortunate enough to sail with some really cool people and win a couple of world championships and a few national championships. But yeah, like the SB20, it's sailing in Cascais is probably my favourite, and that's where you want to win the big regatta next year.
You heard it here, so hunting that one down. Ben, how's things in Byron Bay? Tough place to be, I imagine.
Yeah, paradise up here. No sailing here at all, obviously, just hanging out, surfing, and getting back into the gym, trying to get fit again for when sailing starts. But, the first couple of months of COVID, I was actually sailing my moth pretty flat out down in Sydney before I moved back here. But it was just time for a little bit of a change and get up here and hang out for a little while, and I just felt like getting away from it all for a little bit. So it's a good place to be in. But I had a busy year planned. I had 6 world titles that I was going to compete in. Now, obviously, probably none. But the break's actually been great for me. I've probably been too flat out the last few years. Spending, I think I did 5 trips to America this year before the lockdown. I was alternating weekends between the US and Australia, and that kind of takes a bit of a toll. So it's nice to just have some time off and reevaluate what I want to be doing sailing wise. So yeah, it's been good, but it's slowly going to start again. I'm actually I was in Sydney a bit over a week and a half ago, sailing the McConaughey 38s where Chris Dare steered for us on the Hooligan, and I'll be down there again, driving down tomorrow just to go and sail Saturday morning on an Etchell. And I'll probably go down every weekend from now on, I dare say, but I'll just do the commute and enjoy the Byron life during the week.
Someone's got to do it. And also an actual world champion and America's Cup campaigner too, Ben. So a lot of experience we'll hopefully talk through tonight as well. And Chris, how are things going for you?
Well, a bit the same as everyone else, I think. We had lots of good plans for the year to head overseas and do the Worlds in the SB20s, and we'd also bought a Melgers 20 to go and do the Worlds as well this year in Europe. But the whole COVID situation puts the brakes on that. So pretty quiet in Melbourne during the kind of winter months. But Lammy is lucky enough to invite me along for a ride on with the Hooligan guys at the MC 38 Regatta the other week. So jumped on that pretty quickly and and heading up to Sydney this weekend, probably for at least a month or so for work. But the part of the benefit, I go sailing on the weekend as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone. So look, let's get underway. For those people who are online, don't forget you can send a group chat message through. If you want to put your videos on and you're not, as I say, you've got your clothes on or not eating dinner, please put your video on. It's nice to see faces. Nice for our panel to see faces. So tonight's tactics and teamwork. So one design racing is won and lost on crew work and tactics. What are your thoughts on that, Darren?
You're on mute, Twirler.
Right now.
Yeah, it's definitely it's different at different levels. In most of the world championships I've been involved in, it starts maybe 2 or 3 years out, and there's definitely a lot of training and a lot of teamwork involved, and you pretty much have to take the luck out of it. You've just got to get to the stage where everyone is sailing together as almost one person. And the best boats and the best teams and the best programs that you find that are consistently at the top with a chance of winning a world championships are the ones that there's very minimal talk on, there's very minimal chat on, everyone knows exactly what's coming next, knows what to do at any particular given time, gone through all their sail work and recuts and trims and rig settings and stuff, and everything just becomes second nature, and there's never ever a question on board. And that takes a long time to get to, for sure.
And how do you go about that? I mean, you and Brett have obviously known each other for a while and sailed together on the SV for a while, but how do you get to that point? What do you do?
I think, to start with, you've got to go over the boat itself and the program that you're going to do and set out a little goal on a chart, and what your goals are, where you want to peak, where you don't want to peak. Going over the boat itself is something, especially with the SB20, even though it's one design in the way of sails and rig, and you can't really change too much at all. You'd be surprised at how in depth and how much work you've got to put into the boat to make sure that you know the intricacies of how the boat's put together, what's asymmetric, what's symmetric, and then you can quickly come to a conclusion on the water. For instance, if you're a little funny on one tack than the other, and your rig's one way or the other, or your keel's one way or the other, and whatnot, and then it just takes all the thinking process out of why is this happening, and we got to change something, and then you just deal with it and go. So certainly the boat prep is something that we've worked quite a lot on, and then Brett and in Europe it was Jock, but all four of us that have been there the whole time have gelled quite quickly, and certainly it's a great atmosphere on board to sail into.
And Brett, how does that work for you? Obviously, Twirler doesn't live in Hobart, let's say you've known each other for a while, but how much work do you do off the ball in either sessions like this, or how much of the prep is actually training and on the water stuff, because often you only have a few days lead up time. How have you become such a slick unit?
Some may argue. It's an interesting journey, there's no doubt about that, to go from doing as much sailing as you can with the crew that you have and the gear that you've got and the level that you're at, to get involved with professional operators. That's what they do, that's their sole job. It's an absolute game changer, there's absolutely no doubt about that. And to bring you up to a level that you can actually compete on a national and world stage is pretty incredible. And it doesn't come easy. They drive you very hard. There's a lot of behind the scenes work, as Twirler alluded to, and you sort of go back and you talk about the 1%ers, and you know, whether you're coming up to a mark and you drop the main chute or the tiller slipped out of your hand, all those silly things that basically cost you the race or put you into a port and starboard or put you into a loose buoy room or jibe. It's not all that. Basically, you're trying to, you know, remove all those situations. And that's just the crew work, boat skills and whatnot. And then you go back a step further and go back to the boat prep, and you talk about 1%ers there really brought the boat speed to the table. And to know that when you're on the water and you know that in 5 knots in flat water and we know that this is the rig prep. This is where we're at. You're not guessing. You're not looking over there going, gee, why aren't we going fast? What have we got to do to fix it? You just know that you dial it up 2 or down 1, bang, you know you're the fastest you've had that boat going previously, and you know that you're in the groove. And that, to me, it was just an absolute game changer.
Chapman, what's your approach then? You sail with a lot of different crews, and you sail with a couple of different SB20 crews. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the guys on Arios, I hope I pronounced that correctly.
We can't pronounce it either, Chapman.
took the SBs to another level when they joined the fleet with Twirler setting the boat up really well, and they were going higher and faster than everyone just for that little bit, and we all had to put in a bit more effort. And so, but basically, we're really lucky with this class because it's not an arms race and they're all pretty similar. Like you can buy a new set of sails, you can go and get a good charter boat like Smithy did in France, and as long as you've got good chemistry and you got the right guy next to you, I think you can really do anything. And like Sludge has done a pretty good job. Like he bought a second-hand boat from Nick Rogers, got his mate along, went to the SB20 Worlds and got a good result and just kept chipping away and getting better and better. And I don't think there's any golden bullet, so to speak. There's a lot of hard work in there.
So when you say the right guy next to you or woman next to you, then if they're a helm, what are the attributes of a good helm? I mean, what gives you something to work with versus it's a struggle?
Well, if I'll just giving you an example, like Brett and Twirler work so well together because you see them both with a red wine in their hand all the time. So, you know, if you can find that kind of
hope for me.
you find that mutual understanding. But basically, you kind of know the first time you sail with someone if you're going to get along together. And after 2 days, you might say, okay, I might try someone else here or whatever. And like, I think the best chemistry I've ever had with a team was when I went to France with Smithy, and how open him and Lewis were just to say, okay, Chapper, you're here now. It's your boat. Whatever you want to do, we'll listen. And yeah, it's just you have to be open-minded. You have to be able to take things on board. And it's the same for me because I'm going to learn something as well. So those guys, they taught me something about reaching. I'm not going to go into that. But everyone's got their little thing that they're really good at and, you know, their thing they're not good at. So you just got to kind of work it all out and put it all together.
Ben and Chris, so Ben, your America's Cup campaign. So what have you learnt, I guess, tactically and about teamwork? Let's focus on teamwork first. In terms of your America's Cup campaigns, what have you learnt from those campaigns that you've been able to distill down to the SB20 sailing with Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, well, America's Cup is obviously all about teamwork. So I learned a lot off those guys, like, you know, Dean Barker, Chris Draper, and another guy I learned probably the most about with teamwork is John Bershman. I've sailed with him a lot. Did a couple of seasons with him with the Etchell, and you know, for a couple of years there, I was talking to him nearly every day on the phone, and to the point where he would just want to, every day I went sailing, he'd call me because he'd want to know what I learnt, and it didn't matter what type of boat it was. So he's probably the guy that taught me the most about the teamwork, and the biggest thing is empowering people on board and making them feel important, making them feel good, regardless of whatever their level is. For the, you know, when you're approaching the race and on race day, you want to make them feel good about themselves. And really confident in their role. And then I guess to add to that, everyone's roles need to be simple and clear. You just got to uncomplicate it. So I guess with the SB20, that was the first time I've raced a boat and raced with Chris and Lockie, and we just made our roles really clear. You know, Lockie's trimming the jib and calling, essentially calling long range breeze, and Chris is steering and talking about helm load, whether he wants more or less, essentially helm load, and then I'm doing the tactics, and I'll sort of the only thing that really changes if I want a mode change, if I want the high mode or the fast mode, and if that's literally all we're concentrate. If you just really, really simplify it, I think because we were so new, it was the first time we'd sailed together. I think it's really important just to make it as simple as possible, unclutter a lot of the things. For example, I don't like people calling short-term pressure, which every boat in the world, probably people do it, but I don't like it. Probably leading a little bit towards what Twirler was saying. The best boats are really, really quiet, and I like the boat really quiet. I don't like people constantly talking about the breeze that's on the bow, because I think it's really important for the helmsman and the main trimmer to be watching the breeze coming on the bow. I don't need anyone to tell me what's coming on the bow. I just want I want the helmsman focused on the telltales, the heel angle, and the waves and the wind that's coming, and that short term stuff. So I just like it, really quiet and just simple rolls, and people not to be crossing over, like no confusion. If you really simplify it, no confusion. I think that it allows you to probably speed up the process. You're not going to be 100% perfect team that's going to win a world title, but you could probably jump in and go well a lot quicker off the bat by just simplifying things and empowering people to feel confident in their role. And that can be just as simple as, having the phone calls beforehand, outlining it in emails, and then, you obviously want to have a good chat the day before when you're training, or, the morning of. But probably that worked pretty well for us in Tasmania anyway.
Yeah, and Chris, how would you reflect on that and what you're taking away from what Ben's saying when you're on the water?
I think, we said Lammy, it was kind of the first time Ben had sailed with me on a boat. We've known each other for quite some time through the big boats, through Melbourne and that. But and I did the IRCs with him on the Chinese Whisper down in January. And he and I kind of hit it off at that, and we kind of got on well. And I always think that's an important part of any crew, whether you've got on an SB20 or a bigger boat. Rarely do you see teams that don't get on well perform well. So I'm pretty big on team dynamic, and providing an environment for people to be able to express their ideas in a constructive way, and people not to judge, and then to also provide support. And it is a learning environment. Every time you go sailing, you should learn something. So Ben was really good about coming into that. I suppose, it's somewhat awkward for him because he's coming into a father-son kind of combination, although he hasn't been sailing with me for that long either. But, we just all worked well, enjoyed each other's time, both on the water and off it. And then, it probably led to things like Twirler was saying, pretty quiet boat, pretty no fuss. We set the goal in that kind of regatta about keeping things simple, and it was pretty windy on day one, so that's probably a pretty good strategy. And then, when we had problems or we weren't kind of going maybe as quick as we wanted, we just, would calmly talk through what our options were. And then, on those, in that case, because Ben was pretty new to the boat, I'd probably say what I want to change. But, that hopefully, as he sails more and more with us on the boats, he'll come up with his own ideas, and that was a kind of similar probably environment with the hooligan guys that I was lucky enough to sail with Benny the other week on. Wasn't a lot of chat on the boat. And that, in fact, Benny almost had us run over by ferries twice, so you can ask him about tactics with ferries on the harbour.
We'll get to that.
But I kind of didn't really realise we were about to get run over by ferries twice, because it was that environment where people just did their jobs, and my job was to steer and not get involved in other stuff. And there were great people there that had a great camaraderie, and I think we had a pretty good outcome in that regatta as well. So.
I was doing a little bit of prep for this interview, and I was reading about some of the aspects of teamwork and sailing, and one of them was, keep your people in the boat, which was around taking care of your people, which I think you and Ben have both sort of touched on. Feeling like you actually are part of the team is really important, but also how you actually manage disruptions. So if people are affected by something, so whether it's someone's cut them off here, or pushed them there, or whatever on the water, how do you actually keep a team focused that might be sensitive to those disruptions on the water?
Well, I suppose it'll vary from boat to boat, but that just gets back to the kind of game. I think if you've got the right environment, people just tend to support. So I've been on boats where that hasn't been that environment, and people tend to blame. So, but blaming doesn't get you too far. Probably just leads you to the next mistake. And probably my work environment in elite sport, one of the values and culture things that you see in organisations is teams that support, and organisations that have supportive, creative kind of environments are often the ones that do very well.
This might seem a little bit random, and Chap, I'm going to throw it to you because I've seen you wearing a couple of different caps there, but the professional look of a team, I mean, you guys often look pretty slick. The professional appearance, how important that is to your team, not necessarily yours, Chapper, but I'm directing the question to you, looking like a slick unit or a sort of, motley crew.
I think really the Scandinavians are really big on it. So whenever you go match racing, or you'll see some of the Danish or Swedish teams, they'll be fully kitted out, and they'll have the vests and a couple of sponsors on either side, and they look like race car drivers really. But I'm not too big on it, but it's nice to have, like today I'm wearing my Export Roo SB20, the Australian flag. We've got a little, little logo there as well.
Nice. Big budget program, that one.
Used to be a high budget program, Chris. But it's nice to have your team name on it, and then when you're lucky enough to have someone like yourself taking the photos, Jane, and you all look pretty nice, and you'll have a nice photo on your wall with you're all looking pretty cool.
That's true. So Ben, I was just going back to your role on that on the Japanese AC50 boat in Bermuda. How did you change your thinking, I guess, when you came to an SB20 from sailing an ultra fast boat like that?
Yeah. Well, I sail nearly anything and everything. So I did a lot of match racing for a lot of years. It was definitely when I finished the Cup in 2017, the next regatta I did was an Etchell Worlds. And it was as if I hadn't been sailing in a couple of years. That's literally how it felt, because, in a full year, it was like I had to remember everything again, because that's just a different sport. All again, you're sailing boundaries, you're doing 40-something knots, and the tactics are it's another sport altogether. It's a completely different way of thinking. But I guess, so it was actually pretty hard to get back into normal one design sailing for, 6 months or so. But now to just jump in an SB20, it's no problem, because the tactics are exactly the same as a lot of the other boats I sail. It's a J70 or a Melges 24 or any of those kind of boats, or even an Etchell upwind. It's the exact same tactics. You're just managing big fleets and dealing with the wind and the tide. And you prepare exactly the same. Downwind, it's the SB20. They're generally a planing boat, or sometimes lazy plane. There's a few different modes that I'm not 100% across, and I was trying to figure it all out on the fly. But the tactics are I kind of like all that kind of stuff, and I guess a lot of the other sailing lends its hand to it, so I could it was okay, I guess.
Yeah. I just want to sort of change tack, no pun, but I want to sort of move on to a bit more of a discussion around tactics. Chapo, a couple of things that have been noticed about your sailing in particular. So we're told that you actually like approaching a top mark on a port ley line. Can you explain why that might be the case?
Yeah, this has got Chris Dare written all over it.
Oh, it says, like Chris, you're right.
I have never seen you on a starboard ley line in 5 years.
Because you're too far back usually, mate.
Oh, here we go.
Trash talk's fine. Trash talk's fine.
Look, it all port tack approach works given tide or current and how big the fleet is. Risk. It's sort of about risk reward, and I think Chris. It could be alluding to Cascais a few years ago when I think 80% of the time we came in on port and got away with it every time. To everyone.
Other than the time you hit me.
Was that in Portugal?
No, I was actually in, I think it was in Lake Garda.
Yeah, I'm not steering.
Sounds like could be some scores to settle there. Just on that, Brett, have you sailed in Cascais before in Portugal? I couldn't remember whether you had or not.
No.
No, not yet. So, I mean, obviously, there's probably a few people going to head to Cascais if sooner or later we'll get there for a Worlds again. It's famous for its really big swells, and we talked a little bit about this last time with Vasco, but how does that affect tactics for those that have sailed there?
I just think it's like anything, like I've not been to Cascais, but I think sailing in those conditions is nothing that we're not familiar with down here. So just setting the boat up to sail in those conditions would be no different to what we do now. But from a tactical point of view, I defer to Twirler.
You got me? I think it's like what I've noticed over the years with all the classes I've sailed in at a high level is that it doesn't matter who's come in for the first time, who's come in for, who's been there before, who's a local. I think 9 times out of 10, if you've got some smart people on board and generally, in the top 10 or 15 boats that can win a regatta, can at any venue, because they're going to come in and do enough time training and enough time working and whatnot to figure out tides, if there's any land effects for wind shifts, the local layout of the shores, etc., etc. And I think the fleet that levels out in a pretty quick time. So I don't think that really having, against a local, for example, I think that the good guys will pick it all up pretty quick.
I think we sort of saw that particularly in France, in the Worlds in Hobart, with the French crews came in. They looked as if they'd been sailing here for quite some time when they got out onto the water, sadly for us. But Chapo, what's your take on that? I mean, in here, you with Smithy, you guys got things pretty organised pretty quickly and did pretty well, really.
Yeah, so I guess for here, we really didn't know what to expect. So we kind of turned into the wildcard dark horse boat of the fleet. So Smithy went across and did the pre-Worlds, which was the French Nationals with a French local called Mika. And he was just fantastic. He taught us a lot about the venue, and we managed to have a fair idea of what we wanted to do every day. But still, we'd done no sailing together. But I think we're quite fortunate to race one of the Worlds with light air, and it was, to be honest, it was a bit like sailing on a Derwent. There was probably 40-degree shifts and no wind, and a little bit of wind, and that was a nice way to ease into it. And then race 2 was really windy, and I think we got a little bit lucky that everyone kind of tripped over and we turned a 40 into an 8, I think, that day. But really what we did in here is a good example of what not to do. No preparation. But what we did have was chemistry. Like Smithy and Louis were unbelievable. Lewis, he's probably the best SB20 crew I've ever sailed with. And I've sailed with a couple of pros, so that was really impressed with how he did. And then, but going from here and then watching how much Smithy's improved in the Tasmanian states, and they were probably the quickest boat, but obviously they had a few breakages, and you saw the consistency with Chris and Ben, and how they you could see what Ben brought to that team and just put it together and keep it consistent. And I think they won the regatta with 2 races to spare, or 1?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, 1, I think, but yeah, we're just consistent.
Chapo, you talked about Lewis Noy then being perhaps one of the best, if not the best crew you've sailed with. Again, tell us why.
Firstly, his attitude, then second of all, his fitness, and then thirdly, how he was raised in sailing, and obviously experience did a pretty good job. But I think he comes out of the real Tasmanian mould of, is it the Sandy Bay Sailing Club down there, the dinghy stuff, like the cadets and the other little things they do down there. I'm not too crash hot on the classes. I think he's done the teams racing, and there's a group of them. There's Elliot and all of those guys, that Rowan, Ollie, Nicholas. There's so many of them. Woodsy, all those guys. I remember when I was a lot younger and I didn't really do much sailing, but you always hear about Sandy Bay Sailing Club or Royal Tasmania doing so well in the teams racing, the schools teams racing. I'm not sure if that still happens, but
yeah, it does.
Really got to capitalise on having those really good kids and do what you can to put them in the right spot. You know, I think the Porco Rosso guys have been really lucky to have Paul do what they've done. It'd be great. You know, we've seen Will Sargent doing what he's doing now, but it'd be great to see just a couple more youth teams and give them the opportunity. And like Ollie Nicholas, he almost beat us at that Nationals years ago, and then obviously this year they didn't do too well. But there's a lot of talent down in Tasmania. Probably the biggest sailing talent apart from Lake Macquarie in the country.
Go the lake.
We're lucky to have Jill Abel on tonight. Jill's the treasurer of the SB20 class and former Commodore of the Sandy Bay Sailing Club. Jill, have you got any sort of comment there about the training program that these youngsters go through? I think Lewis Noy was the first Tasmanian youth champion ever. So can you just describe the program down here for us?
I'd say it's generational. It's been going for 40, 50, 60 years of a really volunteer-run club where lots of parents are involved, and sometimes you see sporting groups where parents are too involved and lots of sports are moving away from that. But I think sailing's always one of those things when you take young kids and throw them out in the water. Sometimes it's a bit of a daunting experience, and if you've got parents out on the water and rescue boats and volunteering, I think they're the kids that actually end up staying. And I think Sandy Bay's maintained that volunteer basis forever and a day, and I think that's probably what set it aside. It's a real family club, everyone's involved, and the kids learn to be pretty tough and resilient on the Derwent, and when they go overseas or elsewhere, then they seem to really have a cut amongst on top of the others.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for joining us tonight. Chapo, I don't want you to guess where these questions come from, but and I've noticed this myself, and I guess I've got a few photos to prove it, but you often seem to stand up a lot when you're sailing downwind. What's the story?
Yeah, it's just about trying to get the best view of the course, really, and try and try and see something some people might not see. But unfortunately, I got a penalty for doing that in here. I unfortunately had my foot over the side of the boat, and I should have known, but we got a penalty for that because it was not in its normal position, my foot. So the umpire said. So we got a 360 penalty. And Lewis got very angry about that to the umpire. Thankfully, we kept that in-house, which is very important. But you just want to, doesn't have to be the tactician, it just needs to be someone who's generally doing the long-term observations and talking about, as been alluded to before, if you've got good pressure coming and if you're in a low soaking mode, is that pressure going to get to us before I need to bring the bow up to keep the boat going and all that kind of stuff? And the process just keeps going on and on.
So you've sailed with, I'm just thinking of who's online tonight. So we've got Sludge and we've got Chris Dare and Smithy. Who's the better starter on the start line?
I'm not answering any of these questions.
You got to answer. We know who you are.
Well, because you didn't mention Paul, I'm going to say Paul.
Oh, come on, guys. Who's Paul?
But to be honest, no, I need to stay with Paul. I'll get in trouble.
Okay, so let's go to perhaps a little bit more of a discussion on tactics. I know I've touched on it a little bit, but if you've got some new crews of the SB20s, how do you approach start line strategy and upwind strategy? What advice do you give to people who are new in the fleet or wanting to progress their sailing? What advice do you give around tactics? Chris, maybe start with you.
Oh, look, yeah, you're probably better off asking someone like maybe Lammy or Chapman, to be honest, Jane, because, I mean, on my boat, just again, in the context of teamwork, I steer, I don't get involved in the tactics. I've been lucky enough to have Dave, the tactician, for me on the 52 for a regatta, and, Ben more recently and that, and they'll probably both say I don't tend to get involved at all in any of that stuff. I go where I'm told to go, and if that's the good side, that's great. If it's the wrong side, well, so be it. But maybe, Lammy, what would you say for people coming into class and trying to concentrate on stuff?
Yeah, well, it's important to know the sailing instructions and then get a good handle of what the weather's going to be, wind and tide, and what the variables are. And then I guess from there you can make a rough plan for the day, whether it's going to be a tricky, shifty day or it's just going to be more of a boat speed day, or whether it's going to be one side of the course. So you can generally have somewhat of a plan before you leave the dock, and you all sort of talk about that. Then when you get out to the race course, you're basically nearly any boat, you want to aim to be out there an hour before the start on the race course area, and then just get a feel for the breeze and, get a feel for what type of breeze it is. Is it oscillating, or is it persistent shift, or is it going to slowly build? Is it going to slowly die? And get a feel for how you want to play out the race, especially the first beat. So you're just doing your homework on the type of breeze it is, the conditions. Obviously, you need to check in with your boat speed. Your trimmers are going to be quite on you about that. You're going to want to try and line up with another boat for a certain amount of time. Check in, make sure you're happy with all your settings. Then from there, you're trying to, as soon as the start line is laid, you're trying to do your start line homework as quick as possible to figure out the bias of the line. And then you're just doing practice runs even before the line's set. Try to do acceleration practice to get a feel for how long it takes to go from your killing high, whether that's 2 knots to full boat speed. Do that you can do that before the start line's even in. And then when the line's in, if you can have at least 1 or 2 practice starts, that's a big deal. And then, you want to have a quick chat. Your plan can change all the time, but you do want to have a bit of a chat about what the plan is now. We might be wanting to, you might be wanting to start, the line might be even, but you might want to go left. So the whole team needs to be across it. And, we're going to start down near the pin and aiming to just stretch our legs and go left.
How easy is it to communicate on the boat when you're saying, you're letting each other know? Do you have signals and things already in place, or is it literally just talking to each other?
No, just clear talking. The only real the hand signals I do, especially depends on the boat. With the Etchell, I do tactics from the bow, so I've just got all the hand signals where I'm, and they're quite obvious. They're slower, or speed it up a little bit. Hold is I'm just happy exactly what's happening. We could be, doesn't matter what the boat's doing, just hold there and continue with that. And then I'll quite often verbalize I'm happy, or I'll just give them, these ones, and they just know I'm really happy. And that's just to relax the crew.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing I do is which is a bit of a weird one, but I kind of do it on every single boat, to the helmsman, is just before the trigger pull. Generally the boat's high, slow, and then I just give them a little point with this, give them like a little 1, 2, and that's letting them know to pivot the boat. And I say that before I even say anything to the trimmers, because it's about 2 seconds before we actually go. I just go like that. So then the helmsman's like, oh, okay, he starts to get the bow down, and then I can decide, because I find it's just easier. That's probably my one hand signal that stands out that most, I don't know, until I sail with people, they're probably not used to it. And it's just to try and get the helmsman to pivot before the rest of the crew kind of pivots, and then I can pull the trigger from actually a bow down angle. But, yeah.
I think having sailed with Dave and Ben, they're both excellent tacticians, and they, funnily enough, have different ways about prep and pre-start stuff. And having Ollie sail with me, he's very different as well. But and they develop their own style of communication. But one thing that is consistent across all of them, they're all really good communicators. I mean, you can be the best tactician in the world, but if you can't tell the crew what you want to have to happen, you aren't going to have the fastest boat in the world, or it's not going to be in the right place. So, they're all attributes that I think good tacticians have. And, I managed to sail with Twirler, and it's a tactician on one of my boats, but the two other boys I have, and they're both very good at it. And I think that's what makes them good at their craft. So.
Thanks, Chris. Twirler, how would you describe your approach then in terms of communication on board?
I was just thinking about that then, and I think something for that's sort of been a little bit of a mode of what we've been talking about is, and I couldn't see what Ben was saying there, but I had a situation. Well, I've had a lot of situations in the last 20 years where I've sailed with either people who can't understand me, or because of the accent, or people who actually don't speak English. I've sailed a lot of Germans and Japanese and whatnot, and it's amazing how much better it is. And I do it now with nearly every owner that I sit next to. If I'm in a main sheet role, is not verbalised to them so much, but definitely use hand signals quite a lot. And I can't see Ben up on the shot here to see what he was doing, but I have a lot of different hand signals I use for them, whether I want them to increase the heel angle of the boat a little bit, whether to speed up a little bit, whether to slow down, whether to press on the jib. And it's something else that has been quite good, because going back 10 years ago, I was quite vocal and I would be talking to him all the time. And I think it was too much a lot of the time. And so just with the odd little hand signal here or there and less chatter, it just makes for that quiet boat again, and makes it nice and easy to communicate. But so for non-speaking, not English speaking and English speaking, it works quite well. But I was going to say for the amateur teams out there that that mightn't always be at the front of the field, but are battling away and this and that, is that job delegation. The boys talk about the starts and who does this, and Chris was saying he doesn't do too much in the starts, and he's probably listening to Ben and whatnot. But I think job delegation and going, okay, well, let's go through the systems of what we need to do, and let's work out what the tides are for the day, what the wind direction is for the day, what the forecast is. Even down to like who's organising lunches, who's doing the rig, who's got their eye out of the boat for someone you might be racing against towards the end of the regatta. And then just make sure that's delegated through the two people on the other two people, or the other three people on the crew, so that it cuts down any, okay, I forgot to do that, or I forgot to do this, or whatnot. And it just makes the whole team come together a little bit nicer. And it means that in the background, and when old mate's sitting there, and I might be looking at the wind direction and going, okay, well, I think it's going to start to turn right here. The line's biased a little bit towards the boat end. So I think that's what that option's what we're going to look at. In the meantime, when we go, okay, what do you think about the rig? And someone else has been thinking about the rig, and they've gone, okay, well, the pressure's increasing. We're probably a step down. Okay, well, they go and do that, and then off we go, And it's something I think that brings a team together to bond and get a little faster, at quite a quick rate. Because it's quite often they leave it too much up to the owner of the boat or the helmsman of the boat. And as Chris would know, as a helmsman sailing with a lot of professionals, a classic would be the 1989 Admirals Cup trials. And I remember Gordon Lucas from Perth was steering True Blue, I think it was, with Chris Dixon as a tactician. And Chris was saying he would just get stuck into Gordon Lucas so hard if he took his eyes off the telltales, somewhat what maybe David was saying before as well. And I remember Gordon coming off in the regatta, and he said he couldn't remember anything, any race, didn't know where any boat was, didn't know nothing, because he was so focused on steering the boat fast through the water that he just didn't know what was going on. But then, of course, all the crew around him took up the slack and did what he might have normally done on a lesser boat.
We've had a question just posed. Who calls the starting position, the helm or tactician? And does the team agree on what side of the course they want to be, and then let the helm find that position, especially in a big fleet?
Can I answer that?
Brett, you're yours. I'm going to mute you on that one, Brett.
I think it goes back to exactly what Twirler was saying, and Ben, and that is, before you get out on the race course, you know what the weather conditions are, you know what the tide is, all those things are ticked off, so you know that the pressure's is meant to trend left or trend right, so you want to be on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, so you want to try and control, one of those, that particular side. But when it comes down to it, it's the tactician who's calling the shots at the start, so they're going to set you up where they want to be in that place to make the best advantage of those conditions that they're thinking that will come. What do you think, Twirler?
I think, Jane, you got these amazing people, Brett, the three of them, the tacticians are on the conference here. If you don't want to listen to them, why ask them? So, and have them on your boat. So, that gets again down to your team. You've got to have such faith and confidence in the people you assemble around you. And, not everyone gets everything right. We all know that in our own sailing or work or whatever it is. So, but you got to give them the confidence for them to make a decision. They often communicate it pretty well to you what they think, but I'd never question Lammy or Chapo when we were over in Adelaide about what end we should be at. That's their role. It's their space. All I should be doing, Twirler will laugh, is worrying about telltales and heel angles and things like that. And that's it. Stick to your job. So.
I remember that going up to the 540 Nationals, when was that, 2006, I think, in Sydney. And that was one of the big issues that was sort of discussed at the time, and particularly with some of the Tassie crews, was just actually the helm focusing on steering the boat. Don't move, don't want to see heads move, just focus on steering the boat. And it was definitely a lot of feedback that came around that for the Tassie crews. So not always easy, I guess.
Twirler's often telling me he knows when the boat's not going straight, because it's either up 5 or down 5, and he looks back and there I am looking over my shoulder trying to see that shift or where that boat is, and he's going, "You've got one bloody job." So it's true. Do your job and do it well. Let them do their jobs. Let the forward hand do their job, and it sinks and it just goes really well. But when you try and do all the jobs, which perhaps happens when you're not having that professional environment, it really is difficult to do well.
I can't help but ask, Brett's a boisterous character, if I could say that, Twirler. And everyone, you know, experiences the highs and lows of sailing. How do you keep your helm on target? I mean, you know, Ben was talking about before of, you know, you got to pat them on the back and everyone in the crew as you're going through and encouraging them. How difficult or easy is Brett in that regard? Sorry, Brett.
Be kind, Phil. Be kind.
I have to mention.
What a
Brett,
rock and a hard place.
I'll mute you, Brett.
I forget which nationals it was, 3 years ago maybe, and it was a stinking southwester, and the top mark was up near John Garrow Light somewhere. Anyway, we had a great day. We won every race, and we're cruising down one of the runs, and old Brett's sitting there, and he's going, "Oh, look at the wind over there, and look at the wind over here," and all that sort of stuff. And we're doing like 15 knots going downwind. I'm looking back.
Yeah, but Fraser was
trying
doing
Hey, zip it.
Zip it.
Anyway, and we're sort of plodding, and he's sort of maybe a bit excited, I'm not sure, and I just look at him and I'm going, mate, like, you know, the breeze is over there, we're here, you know, we've got to win our side. So you just sit forward, look at the front of the boat and zip it. And sometimes you've got to be a little bit harsh with old Brettles, but, you know, he comes good for the most part, for sure.
Yeah.
I called my...
home too, Brett?
Say again?
Same message at home?
Yeah, mate, zip it, yeah. I
Brett,
called
I'm
my
almost
daughter's
feeling
yacht
sorry
zip
for
it.
you, but no.
I think I'll explain a little bit
It's a
here,
fair comment.
I'll explain a little bit here, though. You know, I mentioned before about some of the amateur teams maybe having a think about taking this track of being more role decisive and handing stuff off to other people in the crew to make the decisions, or, you know, do the trim or whatever it might be. But it is actually quite hard, and I know in Brett's case, and it's probably in the case of a lot of sailors that decide one day if they want to get a professional sailor on board, and, you know, that they're going to sort of help them out and make them go a lot better. But it's quite hard for someone who's been making decisions his whole sailing career, and now he's 50 years old. Like, it's a hard scenario to get out of.
Yeah.
You know, and we've been mates since, I mean, we grew up together. We've been mates since we were like 8 years old or something, you know. But it is definitely a hard scenario to get out of if you haven't started like that.
Yeah, true.
Ben, do you have anything more to add there around sort of orienting your helm and keeping your helm focused, or pretty much echoing what Darren's saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really obvious. Like the helmsman is just glued to the telltales, the heel of the boat, and the wind and the waves that are coming. And essentially, I don't want the helmsman looking. You know, when we've got traffic coming up, my communication is, you know, we've got an intersection coming in 20 seconds where we're just crossing, or, you know, looks like possible dip, or we're probably going to have to leave out, you know. And I just paint a picture to the point where I don't even want them looking until it's the time when we're going to have to, if they're going to have to leave out, then it's like, okay, have a look. That's it. Like, I paint a picture of what's coming. The rest of the time, they're just got to be locked on the woolies and going fast, because it doesn't. If you're fast, you look smart. And it felt like we're pretty quick in the when we sailed in Tasmania. It felt like most of the time. Yeah, it's really like you've got to be someone pretty special to be steering and want to try and give tactical input, in my mind, especially if you've got a professional tactician. You won't be doing your job properly if you're trying to start throwing out input here and there. There's the occasional time when at marks, and, you know, when the helmsman does have to make a tactical call because the crew are involved in pulling spinnakers up and down. And at the end of the day, when you do get in really tight conditions, like at top marks, like with Chris, for example, Chris is a lot better helmsman than a lot of people that I'll sail with. So with Chris, my communication is a bit different. going into certain situations. For example, I'll say, okay, we're going downwind. We're gonna take right turn here. We're gonna take right mark, and then I just let him do it. I don't need to tell him how to do it. He knows how to do it. Whereas a lot of other, depending on the helmsman, if they're not as good as Chris, I'm going to actually have to baby them around the mark and say, bow down 10 degrees, hold that angle, bow down another 5, hold that angle, stand by to jibe. You know, it completely depends on the helmsman. But even with, you know, I've done tactics for a lot of the best helmsmen in the world. And even with like Dean Barker, for example, I'm still telling him when to maneuver. You know, he just wants to be told what to do, and he's going to then go and do it better than the next guy. But he's still waiting for a call because he's so focused on steering.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Thanks, Ben. Chapo, I'm going to give you the last word tonight in terms of tactics. I mean, people choose to become professional sailors or tacticians. What advice would you give to someone who was thinking of taking up the career?
Yeah, look, you need to look at golf or football or baseball first. I think they're really good sports to go and pursue. But I think if you want to be a professional sailor, you've got something wrong with you to start with. And I think those that know the three of us would know there is something wrong with each one of us.
Yeah.
But, to be honest, in sailing wise, I always wanted to be a professional bowman. I always wanted to be the guy at the front of I always thought the 85-foot America's Cup boats, the big old dinosaurs, they were awesome. And I wanted to be the guy calling the start and then go up the mast and look for wind. That's what I always wanted to do. And then unfortunately ended up down the back. But yeah, being a trimmer is probably the ideal sport, or a bowman, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go. Chapo's had the last word tonight. Look, I'm sure we could talk for ages, but it's just after 6 or 7 minutes past 8, so I'll probably wrap it up here. Thank you so much to everyone for coming online. Ben, Darren, Chapo, Brett, particularly our panel tonight, and Chris, and thanks for our audience. I know we've got some people online from Turkey and Portugal and Singapore, so thanks for joining us. We actually have an encore from Darren Jones next fortnight. Darren's going to be on with Andrew Lectie from Doyle Sales, and we're going to be talking about tuning in SB20. So we're going to get down to the rig details. So there's been a few contacts made to Brett. You've muted. Had your last warning. So we're going to get right into the detail of that. So make sure you send the link to the meeting around, so there'll be a few people interested in that. And if you've got any questions for that for Twirler and Andrew next time, let me know. Thanks everyone. Have a good fortnight. And this has been recording, so I'll pop it up on the SB20 Australia YouTube channel. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you.
We didn't hear River there once, did we?
Thanks, Jane. That was great.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks, Chapo.
Well done, Jane. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks, Fudge.
Thanks, Jane. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Duarte, for coming on.
Bye.
Bye. That's good.